Welcome to the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Dame, holistic nutrition coach and speaker. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a very special episode here on the Beyond Sugar Freedom podcast. I'm being joined today by one of my mentors in the sugar space, in the anti-sugar movement, Dr. Robert Lustig, the original whistleblower, that's what I call you anyway, in the sugar movement, the anti-sugar movement. Robert Lustig is here with us. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Robert.
No problem, Daniel. It's my pleasure. We've known each other a while, and why wouldn't I do this for you?
Yeah, so wonderful. And it's so humbling to see. I know you get a lot of offers, you're doing a lot, and you're having a huge impact on the world, and to take time to come and obviously continue spreading your message.
Yeah, big message. And so you got to be on a lot of venues in order to get more people to hear it.
Yeah, for sure. So I love inviting my guests when they come on, and I think this will be great for, hopefully everyone by now who's listening to this show is definitely familiar with you. But if not, a really great place, maybe you could share just a few minutes of what really got you into this sort of, we'll call the anti-sugar movement. You know, what was your journey into? I know you've got, you've seen some things that really tipped you off into learning what you are now preaching.
Yeah. So really, what got me into it in the first place was the science. That was it. I had no preconceived notion. I had no preconceived agenda. Now I did have a little bit of nutritional knowledge because I majored in nutrition and food science in college. And then I went to medical school and they beat it out of me. And I didn't think again about nutrition and food science until I started doing research in obesity. Which was, basically 25 to 30 years later. So there was the whole first half of my career was basically spent taking care of short kids. And then the short kids got fat on me. And so that's when I started doing research on the fat kids. And then I started realizing, insulin's a problem. Okay, well, then what's causing the insulin rise? And that's kind of what led me to sugar. And initially, I didn't have a soapbox or, I wasn't preaching anything. I still don't really feel like I'm preaching, but, the goal was to make people understand that, there were these two compounds in this thing called dietary sugar, glucose and fructose, and they are not the same. And I started realizing that this was the food industry's way of confusing the issue. It was their way of assuaging their own culpability. And so I started talking about it. And of course, I got attacked. And, what do you expect? I'm basically hitting them where it hurts. I'm hitting them in their piggy bank. And over the course of the next, I would say, 8 to 10 years, more and more information came out about the skullduggery, about the actual discrediting of scientists, about the fraudulent papers, the things that the food industry had done to actually bury the evidence. And that just sort of really got me a little bit more, shall we say, animated. If I wasn't animated enough before, the fact that I came to realize that the food industry was responsible, not just complicit, but responsible for this problem. And government was complicit. And so that's really when I started talking in a bigger way.
Yeah. Wow. And of course, everybody, you share your story and a lot of your journey in your book, your most recent book of many, Metabolical, incredible book. Everybody absolutely needs to read this book. And if you haven't yet, go and order it on Amazon or everywhere you can get it. Thank you for sharing a little bit of your story, Robert. I know that you have been through a lot and you've seen a lot. And it's really amazing when people like you in the world will take a stand against some of these big industries, right? And I know, like you said, you've been threatened. You've been it's not an easy world that we live in order to go against the grain, right? And try to bring the truth to the people that deserve it.
Well, so, unfortunately, most of the people don't want to hear the truth. We've seen this movie before. The people who need it the most are the people who are least likely to accept it.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Oh, they're addicts.
Big question.
They're addicts. It's very simple. Don't take my my pleasure away from me. Don't
Yeah.
don't take
Yeah.
my reward away from me. I mean,
Yeah.
basically, the thing that is the hallmark of addiction is denial, and
Yeah.
that is what sugar addiction is all about. It's about denial. It's about tolerance. It's about desensitization. It's about stress.
Yeah.
And when you're stressed, that's the last thing you want, is for the one thing that keeps you even keeled for about a minute to go away.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
It's
just
the
wa-
crutch,
I
right?
just
Don't
watched
take my crutch away.
right. Yeah, exactly. I just watched an episode of Breaking Bad last night, and it was like, this could have been sugar.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, absolutely. It's wild. I see that as well, right? It is this it's easier to kind of have our heads in the sand, right? To have to admit that we're not treating our bodies right, that we're contributing to our disease, right? That swallowing that pill is really hard for a lot of people. I know for me it took a while to get there as well, and really take ownership of what I'm putting in my body, and arming myself, right? Instead of outsourcing my health to people who don't actually have my health in their interest.
Well, it's a little more complicated than that for sugar, and the reason is because not everybody gets addicted. All right,
Right.
everyone's exposed, but not everyone gets addicted. So, like for instance, if you're exposed to heroin for 5 days, you're an addict. Okay, if you're exposed to cocaine for 3 weeks, you're an addict. If you're exposed to nicotine for 6 months, you're an addict. But if you're exposed to alcohol, maybe you are, maybe you're not. 40% of America teetotalers, don't touch the stuff. 40% are social drinkers, can pick it up, put it down. I'm in that group. 10% are binge drinkers, and 10% are hardcore alcoholics. Now, what distinguishes the person who can put it down from the binge drinker or the hardcore alcoholic? We still don't know. To this day, we still don't understand what that is. So the people who are addicted to sugar may not even realize that they are. And if they do realize it, well, that's one thing. But the rest of the populace doesn't necessarily even think that sugar is addictive, because maybe they were in that social consuming, or even in that teetotaling, although way few.
Yeah.
people do
Yeah.
that.
Or they're in this group that doesn't really understand what sugar is. I mean, I've had a lot of people, even my mother-in-law, that's like, I don't eat sugar. And then she's putting maple syrup on everything, and eating bread, right? Or chips, and just not thinking that I'm not eating cake, so I'm not eating sugar, right?
So the level of ignorance around this issue is really remarkable. And in addition, we have this other thing that's sort of pervaded this space, and it's called personal responsibility. So a lot of people think, well, if you're fat, it's your fault, personal responsibility. They don't realize that there are these external forces that are, kind of out of your control, that are, involved in this. It's much easier to blame the victim. We have this thing in America called freedom to choose. Actually, it's not. It's freedom to blame. And so, there are a lot of people who like that. A lot of people like to have somebody to blame. It's called Schadenfreude. Taking delight in the misery of others. We've got that in spades here in the United States. So, changing people's minds about these things that are social constructs but have a medical and, very clear biological basis is not as easy as it looks.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really glad that you said that, because I know in my practice, I really see, people taking that blame, right? For it's all my fault. What did I do to myself? And then ending up in the guilt and shame spiral, which then drives more emotional negativity, making them want to cope with more sugar, right? We're stuck in this loop of it's all my fault, and there's nothing I can do about it, or I'm too old to do something about it, right? All of these beliefs that aren't really.
That's my message is, number one, it's not your fault. Number two, there is something you can do about it, but you have to want to. My job is to try to, explain why you should want to. Yeah.
Yeah. Why you should want to be healthy, right? And fight fight for this life that we can have. Right. So actually, speaking of healthy, I know one of the things that I love hearing you explain, and I think would be really great just to, before we dive any deeper into some science, is what does it actually mean to be healthy? I mean, we hear this term all around, right? Everybody's thrown out, I'm healthy or not healthy, but what does that actually mean in your words?
Right. I couldn't agree more. The word healthy is the most abused word in the English language.
Yeah, we're all confused. I have no idea what it means anymore.
There's only one word that's more abused than healthy, and that's freedom. Okay? Two words that mean nothing. Okay? Depends on who's saying it and in what context and venue. All right, so healthy. So for me, healthy means metabolic health, mental health, financial health. That's healthy. Okay, when you have those three things. Now, they're all related to each other because when you have metabolic health, the odds are you will have mental health as well because metabolic health and mental health are virtually identical, not completely, but really close. And financial health is something that happens to you when you don't have metabolic and or mental health. And in fact, if you have financial health, there's a really good chance that you're going to use that financial health to create your own metabolic and mental health. So these three things, are clearly overlapping. But if you're missing any one of those three, you are not healthy.
Okay, so what does metabolic health mean for those who aren't familiar yet, or this is a new topic to them? What does it mean to be metabolically healthy?
Right. So in metabolical, I define it. And, we actually looked at the data. Colleagues of mine at UCSF and Touro University and I, sat down and actually sort of broke it apart. What has to be healthy for you to be metabolically healthy? And the answer is there are three organs in the body that are primary. Everything else is downstream of those three organs. Because when you affect those three organs, everything gets better. When you affect other organs, those three don't. So that makes these primary and seminal, and the others are basically ancillary and contributory. Okay? So the three organs that you have to fix, they have to be healthy. Protect the liver, feed the gut, support the brain.
Yeah.
Now, when you are doing those three things, you are healthy. And when your foods are doing those three things, that means your foods are healthy. Those are the three linchpins in the concept of health.
Yeah.
Protect the liver, feed the gut, support the brain. Okay?
Yeah.
So any food that does all three is healthy. Any food that does none of the three is poison. And any food that does one or two, but not all three, is going to be somewhere in the middle, and there are plenty of those.
Right.
So what are we talking about? What foods do all three? And the answer is almost all food does. If it came out of the ground, or if it came from an animal who ate what came out of the ground, which I, abbreviate in the book, real food. Okay, so real food is food that came out of the ground or animals that ate what came out of the ground. If it went to a processing plant before it entered your mouth, then it is not real food. Now, there are different levels of processing. Agreed. Okay, and my colleague, Dr. Carlos Montero at the University of Sao Paulo, and his colleagues have developed a system for categorizing food processing. Not foods, but food processing. And I find this very helpful, and the world has now found it very helpful. It is called the NOVA system. The easiest way to explain the NOVA system is with an example. So let's take an apple as the example. So NOVA class 1 would be an apple straight off the tree. NOVA class 2 would be apple slices, destemmed, deseeded, possibly deskinned. NOVA class 3 would be apple sauce, macerated, possibly preservative added, maybe some sugar. Class 4 would be a McDonald's apple pie. Okay.
Are there actual apples in those things?
Barely.
Yeah.
That's kind of the point.
Yeah.
All right. Now, it has been shown by Carlos and many, many other people now that Novas class 1 through 3 are not associated with any morbidity or mortality. It's all Nova class 4
Yeah.
that confers the mortality. All right. The problem is that Nova class 4 is 73% of the items in the American grocery store. That's the problem. A paper just came out like 3 days ago in American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. They looked at a bunch in Italy. They looked at a bunch of type 2 diabetics, and they looked at how much were they on the Mediterranean diet. In other words, how much Mediterranean type foods they were eating, because that's, quote, real food. That's been one of the, linchpins in sort of understanding what, food health is. And then what they did was, okay, they used that as the baseline or the benchmark or the floor. And then they determined on top of that how much ultra-processed food were these people consuming on top of the Mediterranean diet, when they controlled for the Mediterranean diet. And it turned out that the more ultra-processed food they were putting on top of that Mediterranean diet, okay, the more, the greater the morbidity, even though they already had diabetes, the greater the death rate. 64% increase in death rate if they had stacked ultra-processed foods on top of their Mediterranean diet.
Wow.
So even when you adjust for real food, it's the ultra-processed food. Now, that does not suggest that it's the nutrients in the ultra-processed food. That suggests that the ultra-processed food is poison, because it's dose dependent, just like arsenic would be, okay, or alcohol would be, okay, because those are not foods. So ultra-processed food acts on our body not like food, but rather like poison. And that's the point I've been trying to make, for the last however many years. So people still think that ultra-processed food is food.
Right.
And
that's
I
not
try
real
to
food.
disavow them of that. So what is the definition of food?
Right.
Turns out, you go to the dictionary, pick up Webster's if you like. Okay. The definition of food is, and this is a direct quote, substrate that contributes either to growth or burning of an organism.
Wow.
Perfect definition. 100% on board with that definition. There's nothing wrong in that definition. Okay? So, anything that you consume that contributes either to growth or burning. So let's take burning first. Turns out sugar, the fructose molecule in sugar, actually inhibits burning. Now, it is 4 calories per gram if you blow it up in a bomb calorimeter, but if you actually try to blow it up in your cells who have mitochondria, turns out that it inhibits mitochondrial function. That's not something bomb calorimeters have. They don't have mitochondria. We do. Okay? And it turns out that it actually stops mitochondria from working right. It inhibits mitochondrial beta oxidation. So it's actually inhibiting burning. And of course, 73% of the food that we eat inhibits burning. Now, that's not food. All right, so now let's go to growth. My colleague, Dr. Efrat Mansanigo Ornan, who is the head of nutrition at Hebrew University, Jerusalem, has looked at this question. Does ultra-processed food inhibit growth? Oh, yeah. It inhibits cortical growth, trabecular bone growth, linear bone growth. It inhibits virtually every aspect of growth, and it hijacks growth because it helps foment cancer. Also causes your kidneys to fail. So, in fact, ultra-processed food does neither growth nor burning. So, is ultra-processed food food? The answer is no, it's not. It's poison.
Right.
So when we start thinking of this stuff that 90% of our foods are, because that's, the 10 conglomerates in the world that are, basically plying us with this stuff and advertising it and putting in something that we can't resist because it's addictive called sugar, you can sort of see how this thing has exploded out of our control.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that's obviously what I've seen as well. And it seems so simple to some of us, right? But a lot of you listening, right, might be needing to make that switch, right? And understanding that this isn't food anymore. It's become, and I think, I can't remember if it was one of your videos or your book, right? You were making that reference as well with coca leaves. I've traveled extensively in the Andes, like in Peru and Bolivia, and chewed coca leaves, and they're just a regular, it's like tea. And, when you ultra process it, it's no longer tea, it's now cocaine, right? And that's not the same thing. We can't be treating it as the same thing in the body. It's not, it just isn't, right? So, how do you think we make that shift, Robert? Like, starting to maybe think of those ultra processed foods as like alcohol or as cocaine, something if you want to do it once in a while, maybe it's not the end of the world, but is something to take seriously as a drug.
Well, indeed, that's one of the things that we have to, sort of educate the public on. Now, education is essential. I know education is essential, but the problem is that education alone has never solved any substance abuse.
Yeah.
Did Nancy Reagan's just say no work? We have an opioid crisis. And fentanyl is, laced in virtually every, white powder there is. Okay? Mm-hmm. I'm waiting for it to be laced in the, bags of sugar as well. Hasn't happened yet, but it's coming.
Yeah.
Bottom line. If you are addicted, okay, you may not know you're addicted. Now, you can know you're addicted to opium or, to heroin or to nicotine or to alcohol, but you may not know you're addicted to sugar. So my saying this to people, they go, oh, yeah, fine, sure. But they don't realize that it's them. And I field a lot of emails and phone calls from people all the time, basically saying, how can I fix my diet? And the easy answer is get rid of the sugar first. Mm-hmm. And then you'll find that it's actually very easy to fix your diet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's the one thing you remove, you're automatically starting to eat real food again.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you're to the 23% in the store.
Yeah. What about seed oils? I want to ask you about this because I know that there's obviously a lot going on out there. Like, what's worse, seed oils, sugar? Like, what have you seen? What are your thoughts on the toxicity of seed oils and their effect, obviously, on metabolic health as well?
Right, absolutely, and I'm glad you brought it up. So, in order to be healthy, you have to have two things going on. You have to promote metabolism. We've just talked about that, and you have to suppress inflammation. Yeah. Inflammation is the other bad guy in the story. Now, where do people get inflamed from?
Right.
Now, some people have autoimmune diseases. They don't have control over their inflammation. Some people have other, various inflammatory processes going on that they, that are medical diagnoses that, they don't necessarily know, like sarcoid or chronic granulomatous disease and things like that. Okay, so there's plenty of inflammation out there, but everyone's inflamed. And we know that because you can measure it. You can actually see it in people's blood counts. Okay, 93% of America has at least one metabolic dysfunction. And almost always it's inflammation. So the question is, how come 93% of us are sick? Mm. And the answer is because it's coming from the gut. Mm. Gut inflammation. Now, your gut is a sewer, okay? It is a sewer. It's got sewage running through you. All right, and the goal of the intestine is to keep the sewage in the sewer and not let it leak into the bloodstream. Okay, because there are a whole bunch of things you don't want in your bloodstream. All right? Mm-hmm. Now, there are three barriers in the intestine. First one is a physical barrier. It's called the mucin layer. And it coats the entire inside of the intestine and provides a mechanical barrier to keep things from being able to get through so that the sewage stays inside the intestine, not inside you. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's really easy for that physical barrier to break down. Mm. And there are two things that will break down that physical barrier like that. First, emulsifiers. Mm. Now, what are emulsifiers? They are
Yeah.
things that hold fat and water together. All right? Fat and water. Well, Tide, your detergent that you wash your clothes in, is an emulsifier. It holds fat and water together so you can get the stain out. All right?
Oh.
You want detergents, basically chew up mucin. That's what they do. So if you're consuming an emulsifier, and the names of the emulsifiers that you might be, you might know, are things like carboxymethylcellulose, polysorbate 80, carrageenan. That's a big one because carrageenan is what's in ice cream. That's what holds the fat and the water together in ice cream to keep it fluffy. By the way, quiz, do you know who brought carrageenan to ice cream?
Tom and Jerry. No, I don't know.
Margaret Thatcher.
Wow. Okay.
She was an ice cream chemist before she was an MP.
Wow.
Yeah, she really was the
Interesting.
Iron Lady. Let me tell you. Anyway, point is, so those emulsifiers will destroy that physical barrier. In addition, sugar will destroy that physical barrier too. Okay. Number two, the biochemical barrier, the tight junctions. Okay, so the cells basically are like this. They're held together. And the thing that holds them together are these proteins that do this. And they're called tight junctions, the most famous of which is zonulins. That's what goes bad in celiac disease. And so when those tight junctions don't work, then they separate. And that allows for bad stuff in the sewage to pass through and end up in your bloodstream. And the name we have for that is leaky gut. And we're finding out that all sorts of things contribute to leaky gut. What contributes most to leaky gut? Sugar. But other things too. There are a lot of things that contribute to that.
Yeah.
And finally, number three, the third barrier, the immunologic barrier. So there are a set of cells in your intestine. Your intestine has more immune cells than any other part of your body. Okay? Your intestine, to keep all the junk out. And these cells are called Th17 cells, and they make an interleukin called IL-17, which helps support that gut barrier. But we have learned that a Western diet with both fat and sugar will destroy that barrier and allow for all sorts of stuff to rush in. Okay? So all of that is inflammation. And so all of that is a problem. Now, so you have to start with that. But inflammation requires chemicals in order to carry it out. And there are three sets of chemicals. There's thromboxanes, eicosanoids, and what's the last one? Thromboxanes, eicosanoids, and I've forgotten the last one. But they're all manufactured from a single precursor called arachidonic acid. So arachidonic acid is the driver of inflammation. Well, what makes arachidonic acid? Omega-6 fatty acids. Omega-6 fatty acids are the precursor of arachidonic acid. Well, that's what's in seed oils. So when you're consuming seed oils, you are basically stoking the fire of inflammation. They themselves are not inflammatory until they are turned into things that are inflammatory. But the more you add, the more inflammation you're going to get. So you put these two things together, the gut inflammation, the breakdown of the barrier, plus the chemicals that drive inflammation. And now you've got a toxic brew. So
a problem, a big problem.
And so omega-3 fatty acids are the antidote to that. They are anti-inflammatory. They keep this down. So we have learned over the years that the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is what you care about. Optimally, you should have an omega-6 to omega-3 ratio of about 1 to 1. Even if it's 3 to 1 or 4 to 1, it's still probably okay. But our current omega-6 to omega-3 ratio in America right now is somewhere between 20 and 25 to 1.
Wow.
So lots of inflammation, not very much anti-inflammation. And we're all inflamed. So, adding omega-3s is super important, but getting the omega-6s down is equally important. And unfortunately, that's what's in, corn oil. That's what's in, canola oil. That's what's in, all of these oils that they tell us are good for us, but in fact, actually are not.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And I can think of many of my listeners, and I know I fell into this trap before as well, even getting supplements, right, that have all three, omega-3, 6, and 9, right? So I'm just adding more and not
Well,
understanding that, one of the
if they're
biggest things that we can do is remove first and then add as well, too,
Well,
right?
I was going to
So,
say if your supplement has omega 6, 3, and 9, it's a garbage.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
basically, you might as well drink crankcase oil.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just
I used to
ridiculous.
take one. I used to think that's what I needed to do. I need all my omegas, right? And
No, you
then have since
don't. You
learned.
you get plenty of omega 6s. You don't need any omega 9s. That's just, hogwash. The thing
Yeah.
you need is omega 3s. And where do you get
Yeah.
omega 3s from? Well,
Yeah.
there are three omega 3s. One is called alpha linolenic acid, or ALA. One is called eicosapentaenoic acid, or EPA. And the third one is called docahexaenoic acid, or DHA.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Those are the three. Those are the only three. Now, ALA you can get in vegetables. ALA has value. I'm not saying it doesn't.
Yeah.
And vegans will get ALA.
Yeah.
And ALA has been shown to be cardioprotective. Okay, nothing wrong
Great.
with that. But ALA does not get turned into the other two. The conversion of ALA to the EPA or DHA is almost non-existent. It's less than 1%.
Yeah.
Now, where do you get EPA and DHA from?
Fish. Yeah.
But not any
Yeah.
fish. Wild fish.
Right.
Because it turns out the fish don't make the omega-3s. The fish eat the omega-3s.
Aha.
The algae make the omega-3s.
Yeah.
The fish eat the
Yeah.
algae, we eat the fish. So we get our omega-3s third hand, but we only get it if we're eating wild fish who eat algae. Farmed fish eat corn. And guess what? Corn's stocked with omega-6s.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the whole country needs to be eating omega-3s in fish. But you know what? The whole country doesn't have wild fish available to it. And to be honest with you, there's not enough wild fish in the ocean anymore to be able to meet our needs. So we've got an
Right.
omega-3 problem.
Right. Right. And even if we did, right, there's the increase in mercury and pharmaceuticals, and what else is in the fish now, right? I mean, that's a whole other topic.
All true, all true. And so this actually constitutes a major, major problem. And omega-3s, by the way, have been shown to actually alleviate depression. And
Yeah.
it's very possible that the reason why everyone's so damn depressed is because of their omega-3 deficiency.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure that's a major factor, right? There's got to be many things going on there. So what do you propose we do? How do we get omega-3s then if, for instance, you're not somewhere where you can access, wild caught fish?
Right. This is a big issue, and I'm not
Yeah.
going to tell you it's an easy one to solve. Now, there are companies that are growing algae,
Yeah.
and they are purifying the algae, and they're basically extracting and bottling omega-3s, from algae. And, you can buy algal oil, ALGAL. You can buy algal oil. And you can put the algal oil in stuff. You can put it in your smoothie. You can put it on your food. And, that will solve some of the problems. Here's the issue. Algal oil is exclusively DHA, docosahexaenoic acid. And the reason is because docosahexaenoic acid is tasteless. EPA is necessary. DHA contributes to neuronal structure.
Okay.
EPA contributes to neurotransmission. So you need both.
Okay.
But EPA is the one that smells and tastes like fish.
Aha.
And
Right.
so algal oil does not have EPA in it.
Right.
And things that do have EPA have a fishy taste or smell. So it's not going to be very easy to put EPA into ultra-processed foods or even supplements for that matter.
Right.
And so
Or into your
this is-
smoothie.
Right. So this is a bit of a problem, and
Yeah.
remains a problem, and we're trying to work on that,
Yeah.
as a field, but it remains a conundrum.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to also talk about cholesterol for a second. I want to switch gears because this is something that blew my mind open when I was reading Metabolical and learning about, again, one of these areas that we have been lied to, right? And we have not necessarily understood the whole picture. And I know there's a lot of people even close to me and family members in my life that struggle with this, and a lot of clients who are still struggling with understanding or switching their belief systems about cholesterol. So I wonder if you could share a little bit about what's going on. You know, what is the old way of understanding cholesterol, and what are we actually seeing now that people really need to know?
Right. So this is a 2-hour conversation.
Yeah,
On cholesterol.
totally.
I'm gonna do what I can to try to capsulize. All right. Cholesterol is not a problem. First of all, total cholesterol means nothing. There are different species of lipoproteins in your blood that do matter. Okay? So the three that count, the three that matter the most: LDL, HDL, triglycerides. Total cholesterol does not tell you what's going on there. So when people say, oh, my cholesterol's high, I say, that means nothing to me. Tell me what you mean. Because if your cholesterol's high and your HDL is like 100, okay, you're going to live to 150. Okay, that's the best thing that can happen. And the reason your cholesterol's high is because the good cholesterol is jacked way up. Okay, so total cholesterol, just throw it out the window. Don't even look at it. It shouldn't even be measured. Okay, total cholesterol. Now, LDL is a bad guy. I'm not saying it's not. LDL is a bad guy, but there are different kinds of LDL and the different sizes of LDL. Turns out it's the small, dense LDL that matter. Now, in the 1970s, we learned that dietary fat raised your LDL, and we learned that LDL predicted heart disease. Now, both of those things are true to an extent, but it turns out it's only the small, dense LDL that predicts heart disease. And it turns out that the dietary fat does raise your LDL, but it raises the large, buoyant LDL, not the small, dense. The thing that raises the small, dense is carbohydrate, and in particular, sugar. So the LDL doesn't mean what you think it does. And so the doctors are all looking at the LDL. Oh, your level's high. You need a statin. That's ridiculous. That's absolutely not true. What is true is that if your LDL is high, you have to figure out why. I don't argue that. That's true. But just because your LDL is high doesn't mean you need a statin. And we know that 4 out of 5 people who are put on statins are put on them for the wrong reason and don't need them. We've also learned that the mean increase in lifespan for primary prevention using a statin, that is, somebody who hasn't already had a heart attack, just because their LDL is high, the mean increase in lifespan is 4 days. 4 days. That's what you get out of a statin if you don't have already pre-existing heart disease. 4 days. So when your doctor tells you your LDL is high, you need to ask some questions. All right? What's the LDL sizing? And, the HDL, if the HDL is high, it doesn't really matter what the LDL is. Okay? Because the HDL is going to take care of it. Because the HDL is actually the species you most care about. And then finally, there's the third one, triglycerides. Now, triglycerides are always buried under the rug. People don't want to talk about triglycerides. One of the reasons they don't want to talk about it is twofold. One, triglycerides change with diet. So you have to get fasting triglycerides. And a lot of people, when they come in to get their blood drawn, aren't fasting. And if you're not fasting, then your triglyceride level means nothing. It has to be done fasting. So that's the first reason. And then the second reason is because we didn't have a drug for it for a long time. We do now, but it's got side effects and it's expensive, so people still don't want to do it. What do you call it? Fibrates. Fibrates treat high triglyceride. But the easiest way to get your triglyceride down is fish oil. Okay, that's how you get your triglyceride down, is with fish oil. It turns out triglyceride is way more important for heart disease than LDL ever was. The hazard risk ratio for LDL and heart disease is 1.3, meaning if you have a high LDL, you have a 30% increased risk of having a heart attack.
Okay.
The hazard risk ratio for triglycerides in heart disease is 1.8, which means if you have a high triglyceride level fasting, you have an 80% increased risk of having a heart attack. So
Wow.
we should be paying much more attention to the triglyceride than to the LDL. But that's not what we're doing. We're doing the opposite. And the reason is because people don't understand all this. So that's part of my job as well, is explaining all of this and explaining what it is that they should be looking at and how they could be able to mitigate these problems with just a fix in the diet.
Right. Right. Wow. Which is free, for
Which are
the
free.
most part, right? This is
Right. And no,
Yeah.
and no side effects.
right. Right. Yeah. Wow. Thank you for
And you
explaining
don't have
that.
to involve your doctor. You can actually go to your doctor and say, "Ha ha, I beat you."
Yeah, he's going to take that, or she's going to take that really well, I'm sure.
Well, actually, some do, and they say, "What did you do to get this result?" And then the patient says to the doctor, "I went on a real food diet. I got rid of the ultra processed food." And then the doctor learns something.
Yeah.
'Cause
Yeah.
your patient will teach you if you listen much more than I can teach a doctor.
Right. Right. They're going to, similar to, I would assume, what you went through is you saw what was happening with your patients and you were forced to kind of learn, or your curiosity was, I want to figure out what's going on here. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. 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 That makes so much sense. And I know, this whole cholesterol conversation, so fascinating, because personally for me, my mom went through some she actually had heart surgery because of a genetic defect a few years ago. And immediately that was the doctor's recommendation, was just go on statins right after. And without actually teaching us anything or understanding the different layers. And luckily she just said, heck no, I'm not doing that. And I'll chance it, kind of thing. And, I made her read your book and start understanding a little bit more about this, and about obviously the money behind it as well. Right. Unfortunately, a lot of this is big money, right? I don't know how much they make on statins every year, but it's interesting to see.
The food industry wants to sell you a poison, and the pharma industry wants to sell you a poison too.
Yeah. Yeah. Or the solution to the poison, right? That ends up just being more poison, right? That's at least how they are posing it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. That's
this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, because this is not right, and we're not getting better, we're getting sicker. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, people should be ready for a change, and a lot of them are, but the government's still not on board yet. And the insurance companies are still not on board yet, although they're starting to make some noises like maybe they'll be, ready soon. And, we got a long way to go.
We do. Yeah. And a lot of educating. I mean, I think more, and the unfortunate truth, I see this, and I'm sure you see this too, is living in this world where people kind of wait until they're forced to make a change. Right? I'm going to wait until I get the cancer diagnosis, or until I have the heart attack, and then maybe I'll do something. Right. And, I wish I, started eating healthy 10 years ago. Right. And then we have all this regret. And, I know people like you and me, and there's so many of us out here trying to get people to wake up in little ways before it has to get to that point, because it doesn't have to get to that point.
I couldn't agree more. There's a movie that is not a very good movie. Okay. It's Men in Black 3.
Yeah.
Okay. I loved the whole franchise. Men in Black 3 was not that great, but there is a scene with Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones, and they're on the phone talking to each other. And the first thing that Tommy Lee Jones says to Will Smith is, "You know what the most destructive force in the universe is?" And Will Smith says, "Sugar." And then there's a pause, while everybody gets it. Mm-hmm. And then Tommy Lee Jones says, "Regret."
Aha. Wow.
That is the most destructive force in the universe. Regret.
Yeah. Wow.
I agree. I agree with both of those.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was actually extraordinarily prescient and very enlightening. It's the only part of the movie that's worth watching. But
Yeah.
having said that,
What minute was that at? We can all fast forward. And
huh?
I said, what minute was that at? We can all fast forward to that
About
scene, right?
in the middle somewhere. But
Yeah.
that to me was really, really, sort of like somebody in Hollywood got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm so pleased.
Yeah, that's incredible, and hopefully we'll see more of that. Because the opposite is the messaging that we've gotten, where every time you get broken up with your boyfriend, you have to eat a pint of ice cream, right? And every time, I mean, just all of the subliminal, like eat sugar, eat sugar, eat sugar, that exists in all the movies now. It would be really neat to see that handled other ways,
Right.
and
I agree.
yeah, I hope that comes. I hope that's happening. So this is kind of a perfect segue to where I wanted to wrap things up. Is I know that you are involved in a lot of incredible projects, and I know people listening to this maybe want to get involved as well. So how can we actually start to make change? And I know you're actually, it's above and beyond what I'm doing in terms of one person at a time, right? And their families, and actually starting to get into how do we change policy? How do we, even as individuals, band behind what you're doing or others are doing to begin standing up for our food, right? And our health.
So, very good question, Danny, and I thank you. I retired clinically. I'm certainly not retired. I got a lot of projects, but I retired clinically because I realized I could take care of 1 million kids easier than I could take care of one. Right? And while I applaud you for working hard with your one, okay, ultimately, we got to solve it for everybody. So how do you do that? Well, first, who's suffering the most?
Mm-hmm.
Children.
Children.
Okay, they are the canaries in the coal mine. And when children get type 2 diabetes and fatty liver disease and the diseases of aging, the diseases of alcohol without even drinking alcohol because they're drinking sugar, this is where it starts. 10 years ago, I co-founded a nonprofit, which is still going great guns today, and I'm very proud of it. It is called Eat Real, and you can find it online at eatreal.org. And we work with the largest franchise fast food venue in America. Want to guess what it is?
Well, my first thought is McDonald's, but maybe that's too obvious of an answer.
Well, first of all, Subway is the largest fast food franchise, but
No
in
way.
fact, it's not the largest. The largest fast food franchise in America is our nation's schools.
Ah, yes, of course. Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And so Eat Real is committed to getting real food into K-12 throughout the country. We are currently in 6 states, and we have 537 school districts that we are working with a wait list that's about 2 years long, and because we just don't have the resources, the manpower, and the ability to scale up to what we need to do this. But we think this is going to be the model for basically transforming the food supply, not just for kids, but really for everybody. And there are reasons why schools became the fast food franchise. That date back to the 1970s, because they took the food preparation equipment out of the schools, on purpose to create more room for classrooms, because the food industry said, we'll fill the void, we'll supply the food. Yeah, of course, right. They're supplying the poison. And the point is, once the food preparation facilities are gone, they're not coming back. And of course, they knew that, and that was their plan. That's one of the reasons why, I wrote Metabolic.
Yeah.
So we've developed a business model that any school district in America can adopt. Okay, all you need is an enterprising food services director who's willing to make a change. And what we do is we work with them to identify an abandoned factory or other food preparation facility that can be retooled, repurposed, and can make, lunches or breakfast too for, 27,000 to 100,000 students a day. So that's where all the lunch ladies now is working at the centralized food preparation facilities. And they can make fresh meals each day at cost or less because they're doing it in volume, and they can do it local because they have that buying power. Okay. And then they basically use trucks to ship it out to all the different schools within the district. And it ends up being cheaper than McDonald's or Cisco or Guggenheim or any of the others that are, doing this. So it actually pays for the district to do this. And so lots of districts are waking up. So I would say if your listeners want to, get involved and support something, start with eatreal.org. That's where you should go. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, ultimately, nothing's going to change until, voting, until food becomes a voter's primary concern. All right? Right now, we got other things to worry about like democracy, but ultimately, food has to be on the ballot. And when it is, we're going to start voting for people who are going to make a difference. And that, I think, is where lots of people can, generate a lot of interest. And I promise you, if politicians see that people care about food, they will care about food because politicians lead from behind.
Right. Yeah. If it's something that's important to us and they want our vote, right, they're gonna have to get behind it. That's incredible. That's incredible what you're doing in the schools. Do you know about any similar initiatives or anybody doing anything like that up here in Canada? We're not far behind you guys in the States.
Eat Real's not against going international, but, we would need some partners to do that. We've talked about the UK, not quite there yet, but no reason we couldn't do this in Canada too.
Yeah. Bit by bit, Robert, you're doing such incredible work. And I thank you so much for coming in and sharing just a little bit here. I know you have such a wealth of knowledge, and I know that my audience really got a lot out of this. Is there any final pieces that you want to make sure people take away from this?
Look, sort of the tagline of all this. You can't solve a problem until you know what the problem is.
Yeah.
And for the last 50 years, we've been told one thing's the problem, and it turns out that is absolutely not true.
Yeah.
Okay? So how do you fix a belief system? How do you change how people believe when they've been told something for the last 50 years? It's kind of like changing religions. How easy is it to change religions? Not so
difficult.
Easy, but does it happen? Actually, it happens now more than ever. Okay?
Yeah.
It used to be really rare. Now it's about 1/4 of people change religions. Well, that's changing a belief system. So it can be done. Okay?
Yeah.
But you have to supply the reason for doing it. Well, that's my job.
Yeah. And the pain of holding your current belief system has to be big enough, would be my thought too, right? It has to be seen as this is no longer serving me and actually causing me more harm than maybe changing would be, right? Indeed. That whole paradigm. We'll have you back to have a beliefs conversation because that's a topic that I very, very passionately love talking about. So
well, I'm particularly interested in it because of social media and how that basically calcifies belief systems in a very bad direction.
Yeah. Well, it's the repetition, right? It's, one of the ways that we can create new belief systems is the repetition, right? And what's being repeated on your social media channels might not be the belief that you actually want to be repeating.
Indeed.
Yeah. Or it is. I've done a pretty good job of curating my social media channel to be all cat videos and delicious recipes. And over time, you can really start to train it. I still get the bad egg in there sometimes, but I'm not up for that stuff anymore. Yeah, well, this is wonderful. Thank you so much, Robert. And of course, I will make sure that links to everything that Robert has shared about and his website and eatreal.org are all below in the show notes. And again, just so grateful for the work that you're doing out there in the world, Robert, and keep doing it. The world needs you and everyone listening to this as well.
Danny, we're working on it.
Yeah, you're doing a fantastic job, and I'm here cheering from the sidelines, doing my little part, and maybe one day a bigger part. Maybe I need to head up that in Canada, right? Maybe that's the piece here. I don't know.
Maybe that's your next job. I don't know.
Maybe. Okay, we'll talk about that next time.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Robert, and thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for tuning in to another episode. If you're loving what we talked about today, please remember to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone you love. And if you're ready to dive deeper into discovering your root causes and patterns that are keeping you hooked on sugar, Be sure to check out our brand new free workshop series that will help you kick emotional eating for good. Find the link to download this free series and other amazing resources in the show notes below.